Pursued but never attained.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Massimiliano Gioni, and I have... and I have the great honor and privilege tonight to speak with Nari Ward, who, as you know, is the artist having the wonderful installation at the... And before we begin, I obviously want to thank our hosts, Dakis and Lieta Ioannou, for another amazing... Everybody will receive their payment later, so there is no need to... Now, kidding aside, I do want to say that we are very thankful you're here tonight, and I think, Nari, it's a great show of love, because frankly they could be drinking spritz at the pirate bar and or just swimming at sunset, so I think it's really a great warm embrace that this audience gave you last night and tonight again. And maybe I want to start from there. I want to ask you, you've been to Hydra before, and you've been here for other exhibitions. You've been featured also in other exhibitions here and in Athens. I want to ask you if you have any thought or feeling about what does it feel like to be asked to do this show, or how it felt for you when it happened.
Yeah, can you hear me? Great. So I've been maybe 4 times, maybe even 5 times, and mostly for participation in exhibitions for my work in the collection. So the idea of doing the Slaughterhouse was really quite a challenge. It was a great opportunity, of course, but I also was thinking what it might mean to do a project in this space, because it was such a strong presence. And it's quite small, you know, it is, and I'm used to doing large installations, so I was thinking, well, what would make sense? So I actually asked if I could come back, because I had been to see prior artists' exhibitions, and it's very different, seeing an artist exhibition and being part of the crowd and excitement. It's very different to come and think about the space as something that you're going to take on. So I asked if I could come back in the off-season, and I was fortunate, they said, sure, come on up. And I was a little bit stuck, because you know, I had a lot of different ideas and wasn't committed to any one thing. So I said it would be good to go and see what it might be in the off-season. And what I didn't notice in my prior visits was that as you're walking up, there is a little fire station on the right-hand side. And that became the catalyst for me sort of re-entering an earlier body of work that I had started with using fire hose. Because I went to see the fireman. We got a meeting with him. Very generous person, spent a good amount of time with us. And what I noticed was that...
Is there only one fireman?
There was only one.
Okay.
I don't know, they might
That's
prove me
encouraging.
wrong. But I think there's one real 24-hour fireman and the rest are mostly volunteers. I may be wrong in that, but I keep seeing the same person. But I noticed the one thing that was really interesting formally, which is that all the fire hoses were red. And it's quite particular, because in New York, when I've used fire hose, they're mostly gray. So that became a journey of like, oh, I want to use this red material, just on a formal level, and a challenge as well, and figure out what I could possibly do with it, where it would take me. Like I said, I'd worked with fire hose before because I ended up having a studio on 125th Street in Harlem across from a fire department. and they gave me their fire hose. And then I also live in a firehouse, so I have a lot of fire experience. But the real reason I wanted to use it is that it was a material that readily engaged with the idea of like two really major, powerful elements: fire and water, and also the act of salvation, like the firemen and this idea of salvation. So that level of storytelling was already inherent in the material. And so I'm telling you about the fire hose to say that the materials really drive, for me, the story of where I want to go. Mm-hmm. And so that became the catalyst. So the other part of the inspiration, which is actually engaging with Dacus, I was telling him about what I might think about doing. And I was really thinking that it was about the same time that Jamaica had gone through this catastrophic Hurricane Melissa. So Jamaica was on my mind, where I was born. And I started doing research of different things that had happened in the past in Jamaica. And there was this one concert that I was intrigued with. It was called Smile Jamaica, that Bob Marley had sung. He did a special concert to bring peace to the two sort of warring factions of political parties. And in that, if you Google or YouTube the concert, the one song that they always talk about is his song War. And Bob Marley's song, the War song, was inspired by Haile Selassie's speech to the United Nations in 1963, where he talked about the need for a kind of global unity and humankind living up to its expectation by having this idea of coming together. So it was a really powerful speech, and it was a speech that, and Bob Marley incidentally turned it into a speech about the consequences of this not happening. That's why in every refrain he says war. So I was really intrigued with how that speech, especially at this moment in time, could be reactivated and repurposed to think about other possibilities or other consequences. And so the working with somebody, the Afro-Greek community, came up. And then I think Dacus was mentioning that, in Greece, they have their own folk music. And I didn't know about it, and he says, Rembetika, right? And so the Rembetika became a kind of an idea to bring that in with the reggae. And for me, it was a new fit. I didn't really know about this music form. But I started researching it, and it made a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. It was initially individuals who were marginalized or new refugees that were absorbed back into this society. But it was also, in some ways, a kind of renegade form. It was sort of outlawed, particularly because the use of hashish early on. And it was same with reggae, which is the use of ganja, marijuana. So I found that there was some symbiosis that was interesting. And the idea of making a mashup of the two forms would make sense. And bringing Haile Selassie's speech into the dialogue really was a fit for the work.
I don't want to delve in stereotypes, but apparently when Selassie went to Jamaica the first time, he spoke about this cloud of ganja smoke because the Rastafarians were welcoming him, and he didn't come out of the airplane, right? He stayed on the...
I think he was a little bit taken back by who these fanatics were. So the idea, and the Rastas, Rastafari saw him as a direct lineage of King Solomon, the Solomonic tribe, so to speak. And so he actually is a line of rulership from that biblical narrative. And so they saw him as this coming of the king, the new king. And so they really worshipped him as almost like an image of Christ.
Were you, that really struck me too, that he didn't fully deny being Jesus or the Messiah, right, but didn't either embrace it. He kind of played the dance between suggesting that he might be or he might not be. And,
I think one of the newsreels that I noticed is really powerful, and I think that's what stayed with this group, is an image of the King and Queen of England bowing in front of him because he was royalty, right? And so I think that's the takeaway they had, and so they felt like he was this all-powerful individual. Mm-hmm. He was
Well-
quite short, too, so that was
Yeah.
kind of strange.
Were you brought up religious yourself?
No, I live next to a church, and that's as religious as I get, There is the Church of the Meek next door, so I don't really have to go to church. I can hear them through the walls. But I grew up as a Baptist, but I sort of walked away from the tenets of religion. But I have a lot of respect for the belief structures around it. I just don't acknowledge the limitations that it might impose on people.
And I want to go back a second to the fire hoses. And you mentioned how you were struck by the fact they were red. And obviously, you have used fire hoses throughout your career, I think most notably in Amazing Grace, which is a beautiful total installation from '93, which features some 365 strollers bundled with fire hoses. And then in that same year you made Exodus at the Venice Biennale, which has some similarity with this piece, where
Yes.
you have suitcases and objects referring to Exodus and to travel that you
Yeah, there
bundled
were all objects found in the neighborhood that I wanted to somehow take on a journey, a metaphorical journey. And this idea of transformation that I associated with the fire hose, it made sense that these vessels would be vessels to pack these objects that I would find. And Exodus is also just by chance, there's not a line of just by coincidence, was also an album of Bob Marley. But Exodus, in that term, I was thinking about movement, right? The movement of people.
Well, and the Exodus was about the idea of the Rastafarians returning actually to Ethiopia, right?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
But the fire hoses, obviously, in America are immediately seen as also tools of repression against the civil rights movement. And as I was thinking about the conversation tonight, I was also struck by the coincidence that Selassie speaks, I think, in October 1963 at the United Nations, and he speaks about a dream of a future where no race will trample another.
Right.
And a couple of months before, Martin Luther King in Washington is talking about a similar dream, and they both use the word dream, and both those dreams were paradoxically drowned literally with water being sprayed by fire hoses. I don't know actually if you ever spoke about the fire hoses also in that context yourself.
I think it's, in some ways it was in the work, so I didn't, not directly. For me, it was always about this idea of transformation. So I think I stayed. It's sort of like a material that people bring their own thing to. So I didn't want to always dictate what it should be. So I always wanted to leave that open-ended.
And of course, in Greece also, at least to me, and I'm sure to many of you here, the fire hose is a metonymic connection immediately to the fires every summer, which have become more. Was that something also in your mind?
I think that was what really, in talking to the fireman, he was talking about how critical it is, the fire on an island like this, to get to it and to have the resources to take care of it in terms of the water and the pumps that they're needed. So it was a real adventure into thinking about other ways of dealing with a crisis. But the crisis element is around the material was also really interesting to consider in terms of the narrative and the layers it might have.
And obviously, Jamaica is an island, and Manhattan is an island, and Hydra is an island. Is that was that anything you were thinking about as approaching?
Not really. I think the one thing that maybe poetically you consider is the prevalence of water, around you, and when something like a fire happens, how do you get to it, and how do you deal with the care of the situation? So I think that might be more, any place where you have a lot of water around and you think about access to that.
Yeah, and this is the stuff you learn in Italy if you study Greek. That the word nostalgia comes from nostos, which is to travel by sea. So nostalgia is the longing from a travel, but more specifically from a travel by sea, which obviously immediately evokes also the Odyssey and so on. Particularly in the central piece or in the work Exodus and many other pieces of yours that refer to migration or even to the Great Migration or the escape from the south of the United States, there is a fair amount of nostalgia, it seems, no?
I think it's the idea of the notion of belonging somewhere and the memory of that place that you're no longer connected to. Somebody was telling me that nostalgia is also categorized as early on as a sickness. So I'm cautious about using the word too much, but it is something that I consider, especially with the fire hose man, because my choosing of the luggage, the sort of like 20 or 30 year versions of travel suits.
So the luggage, where does it come from? Here?
So yes, Athens from Greece. Yeah. So, but I really didn't want to use new luggage. For me, it had to be luggage from another era. For me, it was really about creating that distance for people distance in time for people to consider it a story that happened, but it's also in the presence of the form. It's happening in their moment as well.
And actually, this might be the first show that it's also very much locally made, no? Because
I tell you, the space, I kind of dreamed this space for the last several months. Because I wanted to bring in things from the fire hose from the fire department, the anchor from the historic museum just down the way, and how to activate those things that people are going to walk by and then reimagine and re-experience when they walk into the space. So that was really key. No pun intended with the key in the piece, but that was a real major element of the work to bring the familiar and then have it become immediately strange and poetic.
And those keys, where do they come from?
So the key was a really interesting. I have this Jamaican friend who lives in my neighborhood in Harlem, and he's a locksmith. So Steve, the locksmith, I asked Steve, can I get some keys? I'm working on a project. And every day he would say, I have your keys. And I couldn't find them, And so I finally cornered him, and I said, I need these keys. I have to get the work done. And he came out with...
That's how I feel about artists every day. You realize that.
This term, herding cats, right? So he brought this entire bucket of keys, more than I thought I would ever need. And so it was a good problem to have this many keys. And the keys for me was really this idea of access, right? It's a very straightforward symbol. And also, I guess in another way, it was this moment of bringing an intimate object into the conversation, an object that people are familiar with as a kind of something in their hand that is talking about, entry. So I really thought I would use, a few of them, but then my dealing with anxiety around the project is just do the same thing over and over and over. Like the work and the repetition becomes almost a kind of mantra for me to soothe the anxiety around creating of the work and the place that it's trying to experience.
Yeah, I'll say this, which I should never say, but I was speaking with the great team, Regina, Eugenia, and the whole DESTE team. They should get a round of applause. And now I'm going to share too much. I was saying that you are a falsely relaxed artist. You project an image of being chilled.
No.
But you are very exacting and a little bit stressed, even though it doesn't look like it. But
I mean, people said, "Oh, how is Hydra here?" And basically it was going from the slaughterhouse, getting something to eat, going to bed, washing up, going back to the slaughterhouse. It was really just that rhythm, and I needed that rhythm to focus. And so I ate well, of course, and I slept well, and I bathed well, but it was definitely the focus of the work the entire time I was here. And the team was amazing. I have to give a shout out to the team. They were incredible to work with, the DESTE team. So they made that part easy as well.
Yeah.
And my I had also have to give a shout out to my assistant, Tyler, TCB here, Tyler Christopher Brown. He was amazing to work with, and he held it down while he was here.
But that is something that then is incorporated in the object, I think. Now, particularly if you look at the flags, I don't know if many of you have observed them carefully. There is this knotting, which is
in all the object, it's just mad repetition. No, because for me, it's bringing the energy of labor into the transformation of the work. So people are always asking me, what's inside the luggage? And what's actually inside the luggage is the work of making the piece. In my head, that's kind of, because of the transformation and the physicality of the piece is amplified by this gesture of its, basically its concealment. Right, this opacity of what it actually is inside.
Yeah, but then they become like batteries in a way, not because they are charged by your presence.
Yeah.
Since we are, thanking the teams, this piece, maybe more than others, or as some of your more recent ones, is quite open to the collaboration with others, and more specifically musicians, as we have seen yesterday. Do you want to tell us a little bit how, because yesterday we saw the speakers, but the speakers yesterday were not yet playing the music because the music was being played live.
Yeah, that's a really important part. So the same way Bob Marley took the song and made it his own, the speech and made it his own, I wanted to figure out how to inspire a musician to take the text, Haile Selassie's text, and make it their own. And so I was, DESTE put me in touch with a wonderful musician, Angelou. So he sings rebetiko. He's an Afro-Greek performer. And so he really helped guide the musical aspects, composing that part. I didn't expect him to, but he asked me to put my voice, read the speech to him. I thought he just wanted to hear the speech, but he ended up using my voice in his composition, which is terrifying to me every time I hear it. You know when you hear yourself, you can't believe that's how you sound. But I was really happy with how it came out. And one thing I was really interesting, his interpretation of Haile Selassie's speech. It's really about trying to bring, not just copying it, but bring his experience, his own experiences into it.
And when you told me about that aspect of the project and how you were also interested in Afro-Greek culture, immediately I thought of a rather now controversial or disputed book, which is Black Athena by Martin Bernal, which is this, I'm sure many of you have known, is this kind of archaeological treaty, perhaps a little too fantastical or too less scientifically grounded than one would hope, in which he retraces what he calls the Afro-Asian roots of classical Greece. Yeah. And I don't know if any of those thinking, and basically the general argument is the way in which we imagine classical Greece as too much to do with the interpretation that was actually created later, mainly in the 19th century, and that we should actually rethink classical Greece as being closer to the East and closer to Egypt and closer to Asia Minor and to Africa than when we typically think. So what did this process or this project?
I think it made me have to consider the fact that, we create these pockets of history, and in fact, sort of human nature is to sort of come together, right? Mm-hmm. The governments and borders are imposed, but we always find a way to cross over, right? And I think that's been from day one, Mm-hmm. And I never really, the Martin Bernal text is the criticism is valid, but I always felt like, we're all Africans anyway. We all come from, if you trace us all the way back, it's all coming from, we're all coming from Africa. So if you look at it that way, it's a fresher view to consider history. What? If you look at human history in that way, you can actually, you're more empathetic to see how decisions are made by government that had nothing to do with who we are, our very nature, you know. Science can tell us that this is where human beings came from. So, yeah, we're all Africans. So that's good to know.
Yeah, you know, and there is an Italian writer, Giorgio Manganelli, that he was speaking about Rome, but I think it's quite inspiring to apply to Athens or to Greece. He says that we always assume Rome or Athens would be the first city of the West. And he says, I think at one point in their own history, they felt like the last great city of the East, no? Like after Nineveh, after Babylon. And, you know, and I think that's also beautiful if you walk around Athens or, you know, to feel its proximity to Alexandria maybe than to Rome. And even to think of Rome being closer to Alexandria than vice versa. But in your conversations with Angelo, what's his take on?
I think, you know,
and is he here or he left?
No, I don't know. I think he's here, but I don't think he was really the title for his, and I'm projecting this because we haven't gotten a chance to really sit down, and we will later. But his title for the composition is "Fleeting Illusion," right? Which is a phrase from the speech, right? The idea that if humanity doesn't come to terms with embracing each other, that the idea of peace will be a fleeting illusion, and so that's what his title was. And I think this fleeting illusion is really the premise for considering. I actually was really fascinated that he titled his composition "Fleeting Illusion," because I thought that said a lot. That it really spoke about. Because my title for the piece is, as you know, is "Until That Day," right? Which is a kind of hopeful gesture of thinking, okay, things will happen. And his composition he put as "Fleeting Illusion." So I felt like the fleeting illusion narrative is valid, right? It sort of makes sense, and the consequences of the fleeting illusion might be Bob Marley's part, which is war.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, I was just contemplating that maybe the idea of a fleeting illusion might be justifiable and maybe sustainable, even if it's problematic. But war is even more problematic.
And actually, I mean, not to put you on the spot or ask you to interpret what Bob Marley was saying, but today I was rereading the lyrics to the song. And it is also a call to arms, no? I mean, at least there are some. Sometimes he says it is war, meaning
it's really a warning, right?
But also sometimes I think he's saying, guys, we gotta get this done. You know, I don't know. Does he read to you that way, or do you think it's a call to war?
I think it's a call to.
I think it's one of his less peaceful songs ever, no?
But he, again, you know, he was negotiating a market, right? Like he is an entertainer. He's not an activist, right? So he was using an art form to talk about resistance. I don't think he was trying to get people he was trying to get people to think about what was going on and really establishing this warning, which I think is what the project is about. It's really how do we re-enter this idea of thinking? When the consequences is war, how do we get back to the possibility space, right? And I think that idea of the possibility is what, when people come together and ask questions and look at each other in the face and ask questions about what they think or where they were when they heard war, what this might mean now, those kinds of dialogue, I think, are necessary still.
Now, this is a very banal question. Why there is a telephone booth?
So it's a very personal piece. When I was working on the project, this piece came first. And it's really about this idea of communication, which is so essential in any negotiation of peace or compassion, whatever, empathy. So in the starting point, material is always the key for me. So in the bottles, there's these little scribbles on paper. And my aunt was autistic. And so she actually did those. She did those for hours. And she took care of my brother and myself when my mom went to the States So for about 3 or 4 years, she was our caretaker, but she never really was able to express her ideas or talk to us. But she had this habit of sitting there for hours making these scribbles or writing letters. Then she would secretly fold them up and pass them along to us. And so I have hundreds of these. My brothers and I have hundreds, and we didn't know what to do.
And it was like a message.
It was a message that all the things that she couldn't say, right? And so I wanted to use these in some way, or display them. And so the idea of the message in the bottle, her desire to connect and communicate, it's called Distant Sound, the piece. Mm-hmm. So it made perfect sense when I was thinking about the sea being right there. And the bed springs, the bed spring itself is this concentric circle, so it's sort of holding the bottles in place. So that was, for me, it was about this notion of communication is so essential. Mm-hmm. And the lack of communication, the breakdown of communication.
And so the piece actually contains your own drawings?
Yes, yeah. In the bottles are her scribbles. And over time, this happened, this is an anecdote, this is kind of funny, that the museum, I had done a larger version of a bottle piece dedicated to her work, where I put it was a hanging bottle curtain piece that the Luxembourg Museum purchased. And for days, for years, they would have it in this brand new IMP building. There's a glass atrium. And it's the only thing that could go in that atrium, because all the other sculptures would, the weather or the light, sunlight would take away, would somehow affect it. But then they realized that the ink was disappearing, the ink from because of the sunlight. And they called me and said, "What do we do? This ink is disappearing. Should we take it all out and conserve it?" I said, "No, that's great. Let it disappear." And I thought that was beautiful, that her writing would just kind of evaporate, but the letters would be intact.
And the bed springs. Oops. I'm gonna move this. The bed springs you have used before,
yes.
And interesting enough, now you don't see it anymore in Hydra, but they were also a presence in Hydra. That people use them to make fences, no, and even on the walk to the Slaughterhouse, you would find them abandoned on that hill. And where does that come from?
I think in Jamaica you see that as well, the bed springs. I did a piece with Ralph Limon, a collaboration with the dancer choreographer Ralph Limon, and he asked me to do something for the stage. And of course, being an artist, I wanted to keep it real. I didn't want to create another kind of space for him. It wasn't about creating a fiction. So I decided I wanted to do something with the idea of curtains. So I made these bed spring curtains. So, it's a stage, so I wanted to reference the stage in that way. And so it became a way to create a boundary that was physical but not visual. Mm-hmm. And again, I like the fact that it was just a repetition of these spirals and thinking about sleep and the amount of time we spend sleep in the space of the unconscious. I felt like it was a really interesting space to explore.
And the domino, how does that?
So dominoes, yeah. The one thing that I realized that I wanted people to spend time in the space, right? And around the space. I didn't want them to just come in, yeah, good, and leave. That may happen anyway, but I also wanted to give them the option of actually sitting down and being there, right? And so I remember growing up in Jamaica, dominoes was what everybody played. They'd come around, have dominoes, and spend hours talking and playing dominoes. And so I decided that the domino would be really the thing to keep them there. And so there's these, and my wink and nod to the project was that they're actually scorched tables. So the tables are kind of burnt in that sort of Japanese style of preserving wood. So the fire is now being used not to destroy, but also to protect in that case. And so that felt right for the project.
And early on, you were also saying they could go on the wall, like a...
Yeah, I shied away from that because then, I was talking about painting, and I didn't want to paraphrase painting in that space. I felt like they should just become the furniture that they wanted to be. The idea was really to activate the entire slaughterhouse. So not only the figure in the middle, the fire hose man, but then you see the fire hose on the floor, so that you become part of the luggage in a sense when you walk in there, right? Because you're now part of what's happening with this figure that you're witnessing.
And the fountain, I think you might be the first artist who makes a fountain there with
Yeah, the anchor. The anchor was a really great accident because we got the scale of the anchor totally wrong, and it was initially supposed to fit into the slaughterhouse next to the fire hose man, and it wasn't going to work. So we decided to move it out, and it was the best placement. Move it onto the terrace, and it was always supposed to have a dialogue with the sea, because the firemen use the sea when they're. So I really wanted to use their technology of the pump to bring the seawater to the viewer. So it worked even better because you actually could trace the line of red to the sea and come up to the anchor itself. The thing that's really important with the keys if you look, there are keys on the anchor. And it was I nailed all those keys on the anchor. And it was really a nod and a wink to one of my former teachers, Jack Whitten, who did these amazing nail pieces. And so
he loved Greece.
And he was always coming to Greece. And in Greece, that's what he would do. He wouldn't paint in Greece. He would make these like the Congo power figures with, just intense labor of nails. And I always thought they were really magical. And he unfortunately never showed them while he was alive. We ended up experiencing them after he passed. But I really wanted that piece to sort of be in dialogue with his spirit.
But now that you say that, in photos of his house, is there an anchor in the center of the courtyard? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, no. I know there's a tree, but I don't know.
Oh, it's a tree, not an anchor.
Yeah,
it's like an olive tree.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
And maybe this is my last question, and then we see if the audience has any, but has the fireman seen the show, and what has he said?
Oh, I don't know. I'd love to know if he comes up and sees it, and I'd like to, I saw him, and he was quite happy that I was back, and he said he would come. I'm sure he has a lot of things to do.
Yesterday, I think we had the first visit from 2 priests, which I thought
I saw that.
We are going mainstream.
I felt blessed. I felt really blessed.
And the beauty is they look like a Piero della Francesca, exactly. So, anyway, thank you, Nari. This was wonderful.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
And I don't know if anybody has any question. I might have to repeat the question because we don't have a microphone to distribute. But any question?
Oh, I did want to just make one shout out, and I'm going to kill his name, but Menilos Kiramagolius, I think his last name. I'm sure I'm killing his name, but he was amazing in helping me connect with Angelou. And also, he has his own project that works with the Afro-Greek called Documentism. That is an incredible project. You get to go online, check it out. And he's really incredible. Yes, please give him a round of applause. An amazing artist and wonderful spirit that facilitated the project.
Oh, thank you.
There's a couple of people.
How do you feel? We had a dream starting from the 63 already, 2 persons. And it's still not happened. Why? Because unconscious, how you said, when we are sleeping in the night, we are connected, everybody. Why is it so hard to dream one dream together from the planet? It's not big.
Yeah. That's a good question. You asking me a question, or are you just stating a fact? I think I agree. It should be. I do feel like the structure that we live in, which is, of course, mainly a capitalist structure, benefits from us being divided. And that's just the reality, And I think what artists who have to participate and negotiate that same structure should try to do is do as much with asking questions, raising questions. Somebody was asking me a question this morning, and I really... just in answering it, I thought that made a lot of sense, is that I remember during COVID, when things were shut down, it seemed like we were much more in tune with each other. I think that we are so accustomed to the distractions of entertainment that we are numbed, and our empathy is numbed to really engage with coming together. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's partly the distractions that we create for ourselves. And some of that distraction is to numb the anxiety around change. There's a lot of anxiety that I think people have to negotiate and normalize if they want to really deal with change. And I think people are too comfortable with being comfortable.
Question there? Yeah, I think it's you.
Okay.
So as an artist, having born in Jamaica and living in New York for such a long time, can you go into the concept of home a little bit?
Of what, sorry?
Home.
Home. Yeah, that's a question that there's a couple of different things. I did my Ancestry.com sort of like thing. Then I realized that I have a percentage of Indian in me as well. So I was glad to do the Kochi Biennial to do this kind of like connection. So I feel like and again, I think if we all did something like that, we'd realize that home is a lot of different places, that we claim in our DNA different origins. So I kind of decided that in terms of home, it's really where you feel the most comfortable, where you, life is too short to feel like you're locked into one place. Like if some place feels right, that can become home, And I still do feel when I left Jamaica when I was 12. I do feel when I go back, I do have that nostalgia feeling, and there's something that I feel I'm connected to. But I think it's because I'm just, it's not like it's not necessarily special. It's because the evidence of where I've grown up, still the residue of that is still in my memory, and so I feel like that's what I'm tying into.
In the fun fact department, homesickness was a pathology that was first identified for Swiss soldiers, because they would become very sad when the Swiss mercenary, when they went away, they become very sad. And in fact, homesickness...
But that was also nostalgia too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was known as the Swiss disease, right. Because which is, for all of us who just came from Basel, it's hard to believe. Any other question?
Oh, it's a couple of people.
You're also a teaching professor at Hunter College, right?
I was. I'm now a professor emeritus. I don't know what that really means, but that means I can use their computer without returning it.
I wanted to ask, you teach some sculpture, and are they using found objects then also?
I try not to impose my way, but I do teach combined media. So basically I teach everything but painting. So video, performance, sculpture. I stay away from the painters. That's the holy grail.
But you studied with some good painters, no?
I started as a drawer.
Yeah.
As a drawer. I was making gestures of lines, which actually you see in the work now. If you look at my sculpture, there's always a linear. It's very heavy in lines, and so there's a lot of. My MFA was actually in drawing, and then it wasn't until I moved to Harlem and wanted to tell the stories of things that I was finding on the street that I started to do sculpture. Sure. Hey, Larry.
A lot of your installations are always responsive to the space and the site, the community. Is there any one or two things that you learned doing this project that you'll take with you as you work on future installations, projects, making objects?
Well, I've always known that the site is, what's great about the site, and I was talking about this, Alvaro, we were talking about this earlier, is the site specificity really forces you as an artist to have to improvise. Limitations need to be accommodated. Opportunities need to be taken advantage of, and it's really exciting to be ready. You have to that's why I was saying I get into this cycle of focusing, because I need to be ready for all the accidents and all the things that can happen. At the same time, it's kind of this thing where you have to. It's not like the studio. You have to, in the studio you have your toolbox, and you kind of know what you need to do with those things, needing to be ready for all the things that can happen, like the anchor not fitting and having reassess that. That was kind of always the exciting thing about being on site, is just being ready for changes, and that the changes can actually be a good thing. But moving forward, just if you're going to ask me the next project, the red fire hose is something that I want to keep picking up on, because it's something really, in the Slaughterhouse, the fire hose became a dialogue with the body, not with this idea of veins and kind of revealing like the skin being taken away. And so there was something, I felt like I was building this body with this red fire hose. So something about the red really, for me, was meaningful in how it accumulated into a form.
Did you figure out why they have it red and in the States it's gray?
I think it's vanity. I think, I think that...
Vanity here or there?
There, because I think they didn't want to, they want people to look at the fire truck, which is always red, right? So why would you have something competing with the red shiny fire truck? Because they always have these beautiful red fire trucks. So the red would be competing with it. So I feel like they had to back off from the red. The one thing though, Larry, because you talk about next material, and Massimiliano is proof of this, talking about site-specific work. So the emergency blankets, I never spoke about that, but we had done a project in Milan where we covered this Olympic-sized pool with emergency blankets, right? It's a project that I did with, curated by Massimiliano. And that was a whole adventure. But I really loved that material. And that material ended up being a real crucial part of the fan, and as well as another piece inside of the inside of the Slaughterhouse. And that material is really what I liked about it is it slipped from being something, the slippage in it. It's something that's used for recovery, but it's also, you see it in like, privileged spaces of marathon runners, and then you see it being used in spaces of trauma and survival of some incident or accident that might have happened. And so for me, that material in its shiny, sort of luxurious quality of it, the fact that I could transform it into something else was really important. And so that you see that in the flag again, like I said, and in the other elements as well.
Two more. One.
Yeah, the use of founded objects, it has to do with what you believe, where is the spirit inside of the object?
I think it's for me, it starts with the story. Like, I have to be excited about it, right? So there's a story that is triggering in my psyche or my experience, and then it's about the mystery, right? How do you take the mystery of this, what this thing was, who used it, how it was used, and how do you build that into a poetic space and maybe even a new kind of experience for the viewer to have with the thing they think they know. So it's always about taking that thing they know and figuring out if it can become charged with power. And the power actually comes from it being somehow concealed.
Congratulations, it was a very political show. It's not just the material, it's also the color, and the color reminded us of life jackets as well. And maybe through your life jacket, maybe through your discussion with the Afro community in Greece, you probably have heard stories of how the Greek sort of government is using pushbacks in the Greek seas to refrain people from war zones, people from difficult, economic regions to come to Greece. So in that sense, your work discusses and opens a dialogue with these kind of serious, very serious problems of people wanting to, find a better life and an opportunity.
Yeah, that was kind of what made me really lock down on this symbol of the snowman, the fire hose man, because it's a form that is generally built, for the snow is there and people build it, but it's never really meant to stay. It's always meant to somehow disappear. And that kind of, I guess maybe tension is what I wanted the piece to also sort of project. Thank you.
It's exactly 9, so
Great.
Thank you so much.
That's the sign. Thank you, guys. Oh, Dakis? I think Dakis.
We have a question. One more, or a service announcement.
It's not a question. I would like to say something to Nari. Last night, as I was watching this magical situation that you created, the atmosphere, with the musicians on the top of the Slaughterhouse, playing this incredible music, and I saw the sun spinning. I was wondering, what is it doing there? And I thought you actually put it there to give us a ray of hope. So I felt it was completely integrated with your job.
Thank you. Thanks,
Yeah.